Are you tired? This is part three, August 28th, 2019. Uh, the continuation of the excerpt from the Ethical Presence TM Manuscript. And we're going into a section now called Introduction to Process. If you're tired, stay focused. If you're tired and you see value in this, but you think it's a lot, don't think, oh, I wish it was briefer, I wish it was this or that. That's when you have to focus and bear down. It's like you have a responsibility. If we're talking about your professionalism, you have a responsibility to stay engaged. Okay, it's your responsibility. If you think it's of value, you can't put it all on me. I'm not going to do the entirety of the heavy lift. I'm doing my end. You have to do your end. So hang in there, and let's keep going with this to go through these ideas, which, by the way, are not being offered as the Word of God, but should be provoking your thought, resonate inside you, provoke your feeling, and be the beginning of provoking your creativity. So work. This is work. Before you can be a consciously authentic professional, you have to be a consciously authentic human being. This is introduction to process. We are all at least unconsciously authentic, since authenticity is a matter of essential being, not something we matriculate to. Authenticity is not a matter of self-invention. It is who we are, whether we know it or not. In other words, before you have a professional voice, you have to have a personal voice that you apply to your professional tasks. You find that voice and the skills to call upon it in action through play, in the making of art. And all art begins as spontaneous improvisation and is shaped and structured later. Art connects you to your own personal voice. You become a more effective professional when you speak and act in that voice. And learned in your ways of making art, you will turn your professional work into art itself. And learned in your ways of making art, you will turn your professional work into art itself. Teachers, actors, and trial lawyers are sometimes frustrated when students, audiences, and juries aren't engaged with the material being presented to them. These others are not engaged in every case because there is no expressed humanity infused into the dry substance placed before them. And I was flipping through cable channels late one night and found a documentary where the rock star and humanitarian Bono was standing in the middle of a West African village saying that, is it Bono or Bono? I don't mean Sonny Bono. I mean Bono. Humanitarian Bono was standing in the middle of a West African village saying that no amount of statistics expresses the truth of this situation as the joy in these villagers' faces. So he's focusing on imagery, he's focusing on story. Whatever was going on, he's focusing on the response of these characters, the villagers. I then turned to a C-SPAN where a scientist was telling a congressional committee that only image and narrative has been offered today. We have no hard data which gives us a full picture of the reality that we are facing here. The truth is that as professionals, we need that hard data and or other evidence that we view rationally in order to make competent and informed judgments. And we need to connect warmly with other people in order to share what we know. We need to be able to reason like the C-SPAN scientists and create image, narrative, and feeling like Bono. A professional should be exhausted after a day's work because she is personally involved with all the stakeholders that she interacts with. Sharing your voice is a revolutionary activity. It is a commitment to not perform, pretend, or persuade, or dominate, or hide, but rather be there, for better or worse, standing with integrity for all that you believe and all that you are. Our roles limit how much we reveal of ourselves. An authentic accountant, for example, wouldn't show aspects of his voice to a client as he would to his spouse, but he would show all the depths of his voice that are applicable to his relationship with the client. Having a voice, I should say sharing a voice, everybody has one. Sharing a voice is a skill. It's not an abstraction. You can't develop one by learning and discussing theory. You have to do things. And my work suggests that you do improvisational exercises is one thing. There's actually many things that you do in my work. You do improvisational exercises, you do improvisational writing, you do a lot of public speaking, you do engagement in group discussion, and you do actually making a case, telling stories and making cases. You do a group of exercises, and you explore your voice in pure action. It says you should state opinions and keep journals and be very aware of your thoughts and feelings. It says that you should work on your practical reasoning, critical thinking, and argumentation skills and apply them to your fields of endeavor. It says that you should study examples of public leadership in all fields, particularly ones disparate from your own, and make discerning judgments as to how those public leaders do things that could be applied or avoided in your sphere. Voice lessons are found in experiencing, observing, and reflecting, and applying the insights that you gain from these processes to the real world in your real world actions with real world responsibilities and consequences. So the whole idea of my teaching is that there is always work in the classroom that is followed up with an out ramp to the greater world. Okay, here's a section titled The Magic of Improvisation. I was teaching a workshop of very talented and earnest teachers once, and I was asked, why are we spending time on these improvisation exercises? What do they have to do with teaching? I replied, let me tell you a story. I was a new attorney prosecuting attorney disciplinary cases in Illinois. Now these matters are dealt with through administrative hearings. I was addressing a panel of 2 lawyers and a layperson. The case involved a Hispanic attorney who was very green and inexperienced. He got his lawyer's job off of Craigslist. His employer was a disreputable attorney based in California. The California lawyer hired Spanish-speaking attorneys and opened storefront offices in Spanish-speaking neighborhoods. He then gave his young lawyers no training or support of any kind. My inexperienced respondent, that's what you call a defendant in a disciplinary case. My inexperienced respondent in the case was overwhelmed by the responsibilities that he was wholly unprepared for. He neglected the court cases and other legal matters of several clients. This behavior is a very serious breach of the attorney professional code of responsibility, and it is usually punished with a pretty severe suspension. When it came time to make my closing argument, I wasn't going to take any chances. It was my first hearing, and I stood before the panel and began to read from prepared notes. In the first paragraph, I asked for a suspension much shorter than the norm in this kind of case. The lawyer chairman of the panel got very annoyed. Why are you asking for such a short suspension, Mr. Thomas? His implication was that I didn't know what I was doing. And stop reading. I didn't wonder what to do. I'm an improviser with many years' experience on the main stage of Chicago's Second City, trained by Paul Sills. I learned through my own way of improvising that I never came to a scene blank. I was always, quote, loaded with my thoughts and emotions since my last show, and funneled those thoughts and feelings through the specific requirements of the games and scenes in my current show. Now I had been living with this attorney's file for a year. I was definitely loaded, and I passionately felt that the young attorney was remorseful and deserved some punishment, but that the real bad actor in this case was the employing attorney in California that was beyond the reach of the Illinois hearing room. I thought the young lawyer needed education more than punishment. I felt strongly, although I had no data evidence at hand to back it up, that the Spanish-speaking community probably needed good lawyers. And if we help this young guy, get his act together, he could help a lot of people. I also thought that my agency was too quick to punish in general. We were getting beans, as they were often called, convictions, to justify our budget. But maybe some of those beans weren't wise or just. I passionately blurted out an improvised rant, saying just what I thought about the matter. My supervising attorney stared at me dumbfounded. She hadn't heard many passionate arguments for less punishment from one of the agency's lawyers. The respondent's attorney jumped up and argued that I went too far. She was afraid my argument would engender a negative backlash from the panel and that her client would get a harsher sentence than usual. I sat down in a daze, wondering about what I had just done and waiting for the panel's decision. I didn't have to wait very long. The panel returned with their finding in 10 minutes. It turns out that the layperson on the panel was Hispanic. I didn't know that during the hearing. She had what sounded like a German name, and to me, looked German too. I guess whatever looking German means. She offered the decision of the group. She emphatically agreed with me about the need for good attorneys in the Hispanic community and the need to educate rather than punish the potential good ones. She agreed with me that the real bad actor was in California and beyond our reach. The panel accepted my recommendation of a lower sanction. This is the magic of improvisation, I shouted excitedly. The circumstances forced me to abandon my plan. All of my preparation had to be expressed in a different form than I had laid out. I had to say new things. I had to look people in the eye and connect with them as human beings. I had to reveal my emotions, my passions, and offer myself to them, not as a disembodied rational voice, but as a man. I said things that resonated in another person's heart, and then she spoke her solidarity with me, to me, and the rest of the world. Something very human and beautiful happened in that hearing room, and something that was good professionally for me and for other people. And that is what improvisation has to do with teaching and every other damn profession. When teachers just drone on reading narrations to PowerPoint presentations that they wrote years ago, without adapting the human interactions to the needs of the new and specific students sitting in front of them, and the changes in the world since they originally developed their lecture. They are acting like I was when I nervously read the beginning of my closing argument. They need improvisation to find and rediscover their voice itself and to use as a technique when they are actually in the moment of doing their job. More improvisation would make our struggling education system and our teachers and students a lot more humane and effective. Okay, here's the next section. People sometimes get improvisation. By the way, I didn't improvise much off of that section, and there's a reason why, because it's still very relevant, and I think it's of the moment. It still says something that's very important. People sometimes get improvisation backwards. It requires preparation and is not winging it. People think improvisation involves ad-libbing or making up the content of what you have to say, and therefore having a necessary stiffness in the way you connect to other people. The opposite is true. A good improviser is so full with things to say because she has thought about them in solitude and been aware of her feelings in every waking minute, that she doesn't have to worry about the words, and she can spend all of her time touching and seeing and hearing and being open to other people she's engaged with. This is a general point about improvisation, and I would say this particularly directly to how poorly improvisation is done and taught in general at the institutions of improvisation. Sorry, have to be critical, have to make a distinction, have to say, for this reason, I have left you. Improvisation has so much to do about the preparation of the improviser. Whereas in writing, you might write and then rewrite a piece. In improvisation, it's more like preparation for an athletic game. A basketball player always has to play a different game. You never know exactly what's going to happen in an athletic game, and yet they practice and practice and practice, so they bring the essence of who they are as a basketball player to the game. And that's what improvisation is. That's what a good improviser is. And this is one of the many reasons why most improvisations are so terrible, because they have really no content or any meaning. To me, a good improvisation should have as much meaning as the written word or a painting. Something should be brought to it. Improvisation is a who, character, a what, or characters, a what, some sort of action going on, a where, an environment, and this is the part that is largely forgotten, and why so much of the improvisation that I've seen in the last few years, and actually it goes a couple years back because I can't bear to watch it, has a comment. A comment. It has a point of view. It has something to say to the world. The world has no meaning. We bring meaning to it. That's what creativity is. The world is just protoplasm smashing into each other. But the greatness of existence is that we can come in there and we can form it and we can shape it. And that's what improvisation's about. So if I ever taught this to actors, a lot of it wouldn't just be showing up and improvising for a couple hours and then going out drinking, which is what most improvisational workshops are like. There would be a lot of work at home, a lot of journal keeping, a lot of observation, a lot of discussing about who you are and what you bring to the stage. Concrete things that then you can apply into the scenes. That's what makes a good improviser. That's why a lot of what you see in improvisation is you see good actors. I mean, when you see high level improvisation, what you're seeing are good actors doing exercises that then when they have a script where somebody else has come up with some sort of meaning, they excel. And that's the limitation of improvisation. Improvisation should actually be an art form in and of itself. Improvisation should actually look as good as anything that's scripted. And I know because I've done it. So I'm an improvisational artist, but I'm not part of Second City and I'm not part of IO. I'm an alumnus of Second City, and like I say, I appreciate it. I work there on the stage. I consider it like a PhD in this work, but now this work is my own. I do not ascribe to what I've seen at those places. What I see there is mediocrity or worse. Okay, here's a brief one. Forget yourself. It's a paradox. To be yourself, you have to forget yourself. Engage with the world, not your ego. Shyness has a lot in common with arrogance. They are both involved with concerns of how you'll be assessed by the world. Explore the world. Concentrate on your jobs. You'll find yourself there. That's the whole idea of improvisation. You have a focus, and you follow that focus. And by concentrating on that focus, you reveal yourself. Any of this self-indulgent work about worrying about being introverted or whatever is completely beside the point, and it's not the way the art form works. It's a complete misunderstanding of what improvisation is, actually. It's up to you to connect the dots. I'm an artist. Artists aren't experts. I once defined improvisation as the art of not knowing what you are doing. And I will stick with that definition. Look, I wrote this book. I do this work to share my voice. I tell you what I think. I share what I feel. I clue you in on what I know. I do that primarily with my writing, but I do this teaching. And it's a damn shame that I'm sitting here doing it on these videos. I need opportunities in order to do this. I need classes and I need students to work with. This will help them. Okay? But I need the people who are in the responsibility to hire people to make this happen. I need them to do that. They need to do that. They can't be just dismissive of it because they're checking off boxes and they're putting in what's simple and easy and can have everybody say, oh, this is great. I need somebody who actually seriously wants this to get done. I tell you what I think, I share what I feel, I clue in on what I know. I introduce you to some methods. It's up to you to connect the dots. I can't tell you how to be you, how to do your job. You have to create this. My process is as much as you reading and creatively applying my process creatively to your life, and work is what you have to do, as well as a myriad of other things that you apply. Good film criticism engages the reader with the critic in a dialogue about the movie. Bad film criticism is just consumer reporting. I like it. I don't like it. Who cares what you like? No one. How's it going to move you? What are you going to do with it? That's what teaching is. The parallel to film criticism is applies to teaching as well. This isn't something to be consumed. Art is an eternal dialogue. All art inspires more art. When you are done with this video, and actually when you're done with reading the stuff that I have, and when you're done with any class that I might teach you in, I suggest that you go out and make something. Okay. Here's another point. Authenticity in action has nothing to do with introversion or extroversion. The idea that it's preferable to be loud and outgoing as opposed to quiet and reflected, or vice versa, is bullshit. We need introversion to reflect and extroversion to connect. We all have the capacity to do both. When you think of terms of a task and forget about your self-image, which is another bullshit contest, what we think of ourselves is useless. It's what we actually are that matters. We use the parts of ourselves that we need to use when we need to use them. I'm with Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire was an educator who worked with highly illiterate peasant populations in the middle of the last century. He wrote a great book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. In it, he decries what he calls as the banking system of education. This is the system where a teacher or writer is an acknowledged expert in his field. He metaphorically rips off the top of his readers' and students' skulls and deposits the so-called truth into their brains. The acts of reading and learning are ones of submissiveness and obedience by the readers or learners, and absolute power by the teacher or writer. Freire exposes the intellectual dishonesty of this system. For example, those uneducated peasants knew a lot about their country's governmental and economic systems because they had borne the brunt of those systems' injustices. They didn't need to learn the systems. They had to analyze them and act upon them in order to advocate for their own needs. Good education is a call to thought and action, not a command for a pledge of allegiance or regurgitation. Good education is an exploration of what everyone knows, a discovery of new things that some or all didn't know, and an evaluation of all found to the lives of everyone involved, including the writer or teacher. You, dear reader or listener, viewer, are my partner here, not my apprentice. We are brothers and sisters on a journey. Another very short section, experience, observe, reflect, apply. This is an art book. These are art classes. This is an art blog. No one can teach you how to make art. They can just show you a few things when you're ready to start figuring it out. Do those verbs when you read this book. Listen to this video, do the class, experience the blog. Having a voice means telling stories and making arguments. We connect with others through narrative, and we fight for what we believe through advocacy. This book is basically a collection of stories and arguments and hybrids of the two, because it is written in a human voice, and that is what we do. Even the C-SPAN scientist was relying on a story argument when he said the presentations that are mere narrative without data are useless. He had no data to back his assertion. If he presented surveys that statistically demonstrated the failure of narrative to accurately assess a situation, he would have had a stronger argument. But I do not believe he could have found it. Good art employs reason and is every bit as meticulous in its observation of phenomena as science. Okay, on the next section, art is a search for reality, and reality sits on a shifting point. That's it. Art's a search for reality, and reality sits on a searching point. You can always go deeper, and it always moves. Next section. The heart of improvisation is transformation. Comfortable adaptation to inevitable and natural change is a secret of good improvisation and authentic professional presence. It's about a change of the who, people, the what, actions and activities, the where, physical, cultural, emotional environments that we found ourselves involved with, and the comments, our and others' feelings, thoughts, and values and opinion associated with that who, what, and where. Next section. Don't worry about originality. Concentrate on your task and your authenticity. If you are authentic, you will be unique. No two people are alike. If you closely resemble someone else, don't worry. Truth is more effective than cleverness. Innovation comes in uncovering an unacknowledged aspect of reality, not imagining something out of the blue. Depth is the key quality of good improvisation and authentic professional presence, authentic personal presence, professional or otherwise. The real new ideas come from the ancient depths of our soul. And by the way, as I read that part, I mean, now what's the difference? You say, oh, well, I heard that on the video. So you say, well, that makes sense to me about the difference between originality and authenticity. So I got something out of it. You did. And if you see it in a written piece or in one of my storytelling or spoken word videos and you get something out of that, that's even better than here in this lecture format. The thing that you would get in a teaching format is that you get up and you do something, and then that point is related specifically to what you are doing. And that's really, if you want to teach someone, that's what you have to do. You have to, or if you want to learn something, you start with a specific. So that's the difference between doing this in a class and listening to this in a video. And part of the class would be, this would be laid out in a lecture. I might not even have to bother with these lectures anymore. I can just put this video on and put my feet up until it's time to get started. But still, the point is not going to be completely made to you personally for how you're going to do it until you're actually engaged in the process of doing it. So that's the way that you step beyond audience and you actually become a participant, which is what my classes are about. Okay. Our humanity is what we all have in common. It is the way that we express our humanity that's incredibly diverse. This is repetitious of what I've said before, but I think this is a pretty clear statement of it. There is a core in everyone that is deeper than gender, race, ethnicity, sexual preference, or any other classification that you could think of. There is a core that is deeper than all of our individual voices. When we touch that core in another while maintaining our true personal voice, we connect. And again, that's where art is. It's that it is using our individual form of communication, because no two people can have the same perspective. It's impossible to stand at exactly the same point at the same time. But when it touches the universal, when it's just talking about ourselves to ourselves, it's therapy. When it touches a universal and it's expressed in such a way that can resonate with other people, it's art. This was written a while ago. This movie made an impression on me. the film Anomalisa by Charlie Coughlin. The power structure wants people to be ignorant so they can do their stupid jobs and fight their stupid wars. I'm going to read that again because I think that's a good line. It's a great line, and it's something I really believe. The power structure wants people to be ignorant so they can do their stupid jobs and fight their stupid wars. So one of the places where my work belongs is where somebody really wants to educate. And the education is focused on the student. It's not focused on serving the system. Okay, and this is what I wrote there. Own your pride in what you do, own your love for it. It's a grand part of who you are. There are forces that don't want you to feel love for it. They work to your detriment and the detriment of others to exploit you for power and money. You can live lives of professional fulfillment. Ignore the bullying power structure and the internal voice it planted within you. Ignore the ignorant around you which enforce the power structure soul-denying ways. Ignore the media that makes you feel impotent and sad. Ignore the politicians and business leaders who tell you to accept arbitrary limits. Dream and live with your shoulders pinned back and your head held high. You are doing work for the gods, yourself, and feasting guests. So the position that I'm looking for my teaching is where that's what it's all about. Vulnerability is a very nice quality. Vulnerability says to a person or persons, I respect you. It's important for me to be here. I trust you to the point of sharing my insecurities. Vulnerability is an odd and necessary kind of confidence. It's a risk that should not be avoided simply because it's not rewarded in every instance. When we strive for perfection in our professional tasks and humbly reveal our human imperfection, our authentic professionalism is high art. It is in the vulnerable moments that we grow and discover the new. We adhere to that tired yet true cliche. We know the value of leaving our comfort zone. We should always be vulnerable, really. What a paradox to have pride and humility. The grand tradition of lecturing people. Stop lecturing me. The lecturer is so maligned, it's associated with droning PowerPoints and trips to the dean of students' office. Anytime a speaker says something that someone could read in a book or webpage or whatever, it's useless. Why is the communication live and in real time? Professors used to be like preachers who would perform oratory to awaken people to new understandings. And energy was passed between the lecturer and the listeners, a kind of spirit. Stephen Sondheim's play Passion is a work of art and not an entertainment. It is a lecture in a grand tradition. A sickly and homely woman seems obsessed with a handsome soldier. Is it the obsession that it seems, or love? The soldier is having a passionate affair with a married woman. Is love possible without real commitment? The songs of the play are philosophical ruminations within its narrative. The reflections about the nature of love stayed with me in a much more profound way than if I would have read the script or engaged in some kind of interactive experience. And that's what a lecture does. Okay, next thing here. The greatest classical artist plays with spontaneity, and the greatest improvisational artist finds structure. The trick is to be able to do both at once and be both at once. A good classically trained actor doesn't memorize all the lines in a Shakespearean play. He understands them so well that he knows them he knows when and how to say them. So I just want to make that point because I might have run over it. A great classical actor, they would ask, like, I don't know if Laurence Olivier said this, but some actor of his ilk, of that mastery, they said, "How do you memorize all the lines?" He said, "I don't. I don't memorize all the lines. What happens is that I understand them. Of course, They were in a process of, it wasn't this freeze-dried process. Olivier, if he's doing Henry V, it's not slam bam, thank you, ma'am, in terms of the preparation. I mean, they go into great depth. They work with the text for a long time. They come to all these realizations. Every line is understood. They're creating something. And by the time it was time to take it on stage or the time to film it, he just knew it because he created an interpretation of the piece. That is what a great classical artist does. And that's the opportunity of doing great classical work. If it's the school play and they say, well, we're going to have rehearsals in April and we're going to put it on in the first week in May, so you have to memorize all the lines, then it becomes memorization and showmanship and everything else. If there's really understanding, you don't have to memorize. And as he and his company's understanding of the play deepens, his interpretation of those lines will change. So if you saw Laurence Olivier and Henry V in the first week of its run, and then you saw it a year and a half later, you would see a different play. He and his fellow cast members discover new meanings spontaneously before the audience. Where does the preparation stop and the improvisation begin? I love the show Inside the Actor's Studio, which I think is still on, but I haven't watched it in a long time. It's like host James Lipton would interview a great actor a week about the art of acting. I think I stopped watching it when he had Billy Joel on. I mean, you know. So anyway, James Lipton would interview a great actor a week about the art of acting. A great actor teaches you how to act in life. Great actors are practical philosophers ruminating on the hows and whys of human behavior. They teach through their performances. They teach through their discussions of their art. I just watched this video of Quentin Tarantino and Leonardo DiCaprio talking about the character of Rick Dalton and how they put that character together in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But I really suggest that everybody watch this video. It was really interesting that Tarantino was saying that he had this incredible backstory about Rick Dalton, a certain type of actor in the 50s and 60s, and this fictional TV series that Rick Dalton was in, Bounty Law, was a lot like Wanted Dead or Alive that Steve McQueen did, and then Steve McQueen broke out of this marginalized type of acting on TV, and Rick Dalton had a harder time of doing it. And that was all great. And Leonardo DiCaprio said, it's a dream to have this type of backstory when you make a movie and to have the writer and the director give you all this. But he asked him at one point, he said, but I need something to do. What do I do? How do I act? And Tarantino told him about an actor called Peter Duell that I personally happen to be aware of because Peter Duell was from Rochester, New York, and I was from Rochester. And I watched this show in the 60s. I was a kid, Alias Smith and Jones, and Peter Duell was on the show. And anyway, Peter Duell committed suicide. So this next season of the show, second or third season, whenever it was after he committed suicide, he was gone. And Tarantino was saying he was shocked by this. He was a kid, and he was shocked by it. And he said, how could this be? And then Peter Duell apparently was undiagnosed bipolar person. He was self-medicating with alcohol. And that unlocked for Leonardo DiCaprio things to play. So this undiagnosed bipolar, so this person who's suffering from this mental disability without knowing it, and who's drinking in order to self-medicate because he's in so much pain, and the frustrations of all that gave DiCaprio something to show us. And, it's interesting when artists. This is a little bit of a digression, but when artists do the deal about illness, I saw these uh, very good New York actors do something. Act the last act of a reading of the last act of Long Day's Journey into Night at Northwestern Medical School for psychiatrists. And they got the whole thing ass backwards. The psychiatrist did, and not the actors, but then the director who was moderating it, because the psychiatrists were spotting they were making diagnoses of the characters. What they should have been doing is listening to what Eugene O'Neill and these actors had to tell them about what these human beings were going through then, because that would have helped the psychiatrist have more professional presence in their professional work of relating to people who have these type problems. And what DiCaprio did in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was similar type work. So a, a great a great actor, a great writer can help you relate to suffering and pain in the world. And that's what I mean by the great actors, serious actors, that they teach through their performances. I also, it's like this is like one brief thing you see. I'm unshaven, and I'm sitting in this chair and whatever. It's not like I have myself put together, or I'm doing this lecture in front of some group or whatever to try to make an impression on you. There was a renowned stage actress, Rosemary Harris, who, as she got older, got to the point where she just wore her own clothes and makeup on stage. And great acting on stage and in life is authentic. So a fine actor acts in a role as if she were the person with the external characteristics and in the situation of the script. And we do the same in our professions. Now, I was making the point here that I made earlier that, I'm the same person when I'm teaching as when I'm at home with my wife, but it's a different place and a different relationship. But I also want to make the point now that I didn't write in the manuscript, that basically the older I get in this is like the superfluous keeps falling away. It just falls away. And, I would do, like I'm doing these videos now of my spoken word pieces. And somebody said, "Oh, you're reading, you should look at the camera or whatever." It's like, I just want to read the piece. I did, I had done shows for a couple years. I did shows. I tried to make it funny. I tried to have some sort of performance aspect to it. I had invited audiences. I did it for audiences of friends or whatever. And it all was a waste of time. I mean, it just comes to me and the words, and that I don't think there's anything else needed there. And that's and all the baloney in the classroom of, I when I even at the point of starting at UIC, because I had done a lot of teaching before I was at UIC, the trying to be popular, with the students, the trying to meet them where they were. You'd hear things like, "Well, it's got to be relevant to their world, and you have to introduce this," and all this nonsense. I mean, but within 5 years, it just became like, I'm here to talk to you about professionalism. I'm not going to walk in here with a suit. I'm not going to organize things. I'm not going to hold your hand. I'm not going to try to be funny or try to engage you in any way. I mean, the more and more, it just became about the work. It just became about what I really care about, and not and a lot of it was learning what I really care about. Um, so there's a part of being an artist where it's always, I talked about it. I don't know if it might have even been in another video. It was in another one of this series of videos. I talked about the falling away of the loss of all these different occupations and communities that I was part of or whatever. But there is an aspect of the transformation is that You get rid of what's superfluous to make room for what's more important. Okay, the only way you can connect with someone else is by being in relation to them as yourself. Benjamin and Franklin advised to never take a job that required you to buy a new set of clothes. And I take that as a metaphor. If you have to change your appearance and sense of humor and have to smile at comments and actions that offend your values, you're probably in the wrong place. Uh, Second thing, we live in a tsunami of ignorance and phoniness. The art of being authentic and professional is the art of working as hard as you can to be intelligent and sincere as a matter of personal integrity. Enough with all the showmanship, the lying, and the sales strategies. How about excellence and decency? If you aspire to that, originality will take care of itself. Um, I have this piece here about Eugene O'Neill. I'm going to skip that because I just talked about it. Modern improvisation began as a method of assimilating immigrant children into the culture of Chicago in the 1930s. Neva Boyd, a social scientist, and Viola Spolin, an acting teacher, initiated the games of improvisation for the theater at Hull House. I say I work in that tradition. I really don't. I owe something to that tradition. Everyone is assimilating into something. Serious art resembles science in its meticulous observation. X people in Y space at Z time equals 1. And that's the formula for being in the moment. When we are completely open to internal and external reality, we see truth without resistance or any biased conceptual and false perceptions. We transcend conscious choice and enthusiastically accept what is. There is something intangible beyond the concerns of the day that informs every moment of our lives, and every once in a while we touch it. Art is the means of access to a glimpse of what is normally unseen. Um, I've done this a lot individually. I've done it less with groups, but it has occasionally happened. I've mentioned a couple of the instances where that happened, the connection with that woman on that hearing panel. Uh, in the case that I talked about before, that's where it happens. This is really a statement of the goal, the learning objective. This is the learning objective. This is what we work towards. This is hard. Okay. One definition of an artist is someone who, once you learn something, turns to communicate it to someone else. I said that before. And failure is only a negative thing if you identify with it personally. Failure is only negative if you identify. You say, "I'm the failure." Then it's a negative. In improvisation, no, there can be no failure because it's always transformed into something else. Okay. Then it looks like I probably have one more video here. It's some idea specifically about. No, you know what? There's not that much, so I'm going to keep going, even though this is long. I'm going to keep going on this. This is just the beginning of the book that talks specifically about improvisation. Okay. Being human. This is an art book. The late great actor Philip Seymour Hoffman said when he was promoting his great performance in the film Capote, "I think no one deserves sympathy and everyone deserves sympathy. I don't think that there is anyone on the planet, if looked at closely enough, is worthy of being judged. And everybody on the planet, if looked at closely enough, is worthy of being loved with the most love you can ever give. I think that's human. I think that's human nature. I think that's everybody." Now, this is me again. The greatness of art can be defined by the degree of its possession of two great characteristics: unflinching and at times even brutal. Um, I lost my place here. Wait a second. Unflinching and at times even brutal. Honesty and accuracy in perception, if looked at closely enough. And intense and generous compassion. Love with the most love you can ever give. The great attributes of art do not only belong to great creative geniuses like Philip Seymour Hoffman. Art is simply a divine, also from Rochester, by the way, along with Peter Duell uh, and me. Art is simply a divine awareness and expression of, as Hoffman put it, human nature. Everybody. We all have moments of great clarity and expansive love in our lives. What if we decided to commit to living that way all the time? What actors, writers, teachers, lawyers, business persons, brothers, daughters, spouses, parents, humans would we be? Philip Seymour Hoffman was a brilliant genius in his observations about humanity. He was a brave and sweet mensch hero who suffered for all of his characters, us. He reached beyond himself and gifted us with abundant art in the form of an astounding body of work as an actor. He was also a drug addict. He couldn't bear looking as closely as he did to the horrors of existence. Those looks were a requirement listed on his job description, so he also escaped. And judgment would say he betrayed his family, his audience, and most importantly, himself, because he couldn't control the addictive aspect of his nature. Can you say that you love him for all that he gave you and you love him for all that he suffered and lost? Can you love the incredible actor and the self-destructive junkie? If so, we can get started because I think that is human. I think that's human nature. I think Philip Seymour Hoffman, as spectacularly individual that he was, is also everybody. The individual and the universal. Full life is a paradox. Diligent work to excel in our roles and pursue perfections rarely obtained. An affection, accepting embrace of our individual and collective weakness, folly, and even sin. Now let's talk about the human art side of life equation first, in this case, improvisation. We can discuss approaches to doing the jobs later, once we are confident that we are doing them as human beings. How artists look at art. When you look at any art, including this book or these videos, do not engage as mere audience. View art like a magician trying to understand another magician's tricks. Okay, I'm getting tired, so I'm just going to encapsulate this here. That how artists look at art is that you don't only look as an audience to see how something makes you think and feel. You look for more. You have a deeper interest in how and why the piece was made. That, for example, led me to look at that video of Tarantino and Leonardo DiCaprio saying how they put together the piece of Rick Dalton. And I've watched that movie a couple times, and I'll watch it more because I think it's really good. And the first time you watch it, just to get, oh, this is how it makes me feel. This is what it makes me think about. But then you get to the point where you start saying, how did they do it? How did they put it together? And that is a large part of the work of it. And that's how an artist engages in what interests them in order to apply it to their own process of how they create their art in the world. Okay, anxiety. If you don't feel anxiety before you improvise, really before you do anything important, you're a recreational improviser. And you came to the wrong place if you came to see me. In improvisation, as opposed to artsy craftsy bowling night situations, the struggle is everything. No one truly builds confidence by executing simple tasks and engaging in a circle jerk of congratulation with their clique of friends. Real improvisational work offers more than diversionary excitement. Rather, it's a process of real challenge and satisfaction. To have a voice is a struggle. And here I talk about the King's Speech. So go see that movie because it's a very good, that shows the relationship he has with his teacher uh, and his struggle with stuttering that leads to him giving very important speeches. He met a terrible challenge of his own choosing, and that helped prepare him to speak to his audience, the British people, who had just been forced into war. And that art it's really facing a terrible challenge that's not of your own choosing. Look up the King's Speech. Watch that movie. That'll give you a sense of what you're up against if you choose to be a student in this process. This next part I'm going to skip because I'm really getting tired here, and I think this has been going a long time. We're coming up on close to an hour with this tape. But read it online. It's on this section of the excerpt in the Rick blog. There's an excerpt of the transcript of my manuscript, The Ethical Presence, and there's a section about "Hi, it's really me," and it talks about introducing not putting everything in the third person or in the second person, but to put things in the first person. And I alluded to this earlier in one of the videos where I was saying I really didn't believe that, for example, in my job, I'm supposed to erase myself from it and who I am. It's a personal relationship. And this is really, well, actually, I think I will read this because this is the last thing. And then we're done going through this series of videos of um, which is just the introductory comments of the manuscript. And going through these in a video form is a couple hours of video. So I'm just going to finish this. Hi, it's really me. There's a difference between narcissistic, worried self-involvement, which is rightly dismissed in improvisation and other arts classes as being, quote, stuck in one's head, and real consciousness of one's actual thoughts and emotions. The failure to make that crucial distinction leads to the instruction, don't think, that leads to scenes, written pieces, whatever, without thought. It's like, don't be self-obsessive, don't worry, but don't think is a ridiculous note. You should be thinking all the time. And feeling and a lot of other things, but thinking should always be there. You and me, in our most consciously authentic versions, aware of and expressing our truest and deepest thoughts and emotions through exquisitely detailed word and deed, are great gifts to ourselves that we are called to re-gift to the world. I have noticed, this was a while ago, and now it's in my writing all the time. There's been a million changes in my writing since I wrote this, but this is what I was noticing at that moment. I have noticed an emergence of the word I in my recent writing. It initially concerned me. Who would care? I came to three conclusions. It's liberating, joyful, and empowering to write about oneself. Our thoughts and emotions, even when, as they often are, other directed, are still our thoughts and emotions. Jesus, divinity, mythic figure, literary character, or historical figure, take your pick, said a lot about other people and did a lot for them, always with the awareness that he was the Son of God. Everything we say and do is about us. We are the most specific element in all that we create. If I write about improvisation, for example, with optimism and frustration, I'm ultimately writing about what I want from improvisation for myself and other people. I count. I am in the frame of the scene and the point of view of the scene. Secondly, to effectively write about oneself, I have to do so with contemplative depth, leading to the exquisite detail that I mentioned above. Diary, journal writing, and the initial exploratory moments of improvisational acting are processes that lead to this detail. It is important for me to recognize the difference between the process and the resulting deep writing as an aspect of my personal craft. If I notice my shifts from we to I, if I share myself with artfully communicated truth, I avail myself of the opportunity to truly connect with fellow artists on page and stage and audience. This leads me to my third conclusion in the relevance of the Campbell quote above. I don't write or act or teach or direct to please any particular audience. I tell my workshops to let your audience find you. We are not meant to connect with everybody. What we sacrifice in shallow popularity, we gain in real engagement with an equally present other. If one is abnegating themselves, pretending, performing, or persuading, such engagement is impossible because one is not really there. Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung, before Campbell, married Eastern and Western spiritual tradition. The East connects us to the all. The West is a tradition that connects us to our individual destinies. The East gives us a sense of participation in all creation. The West gives us focus. We are limited in our existence. We can only love a finite number of people, places, and things in our finite lives, and we can see the limitless universe in our necessarily limited view. If I can straddle time and narrow location and eternity in the vastness of all that in the same creative observation and insight in my writing, teaching, and directing, I've had a good day. Ego is not egotism. Uh, and this whole thing, the entirety of these 3 videos is copyright 2019, Richard Thomas. And that's it for this project.